Tucker Carlson has left Fox News and the mainstream media are celebrating, but should they check themselves before they wreck themselves, because Tucker's departure could be the beginning of the end for the mainstream. Hello there, you 6.4 million awakening wonders. Thanks for joining me on this voyage to truth and freedom on this great day where the mainstream media took a heavy blow. Tucker Carlson has left Fox News, and I see this as a great harbinger, the beginning of the end for the mainstream. A mainstream media that's been reduced to packaging and selling your data. They do it more than even porn sites. Check those facts for yourself. A mainstream media that siphons us off into silos, turns us against one another, plays to the gallery, preaches to the converted, has got nothing original to say, and serves the government rather than the public they were set up to inform. Remember, turn on the notification bell and subscribe right now so that we can continue to bring you great independent content every single day of the goddamn week, 365 days a year, even if it kills us, goddamn it. Let's get into the story and see how the mainstream are reporting on Tucker's departure.
Right now, the media landscape is significantly different than it was just 2 hours ago, with two of the highest profile cable hosts out of a job.
Oh yeah, and Don Lemon left CNN as well.
First, the news that Tucker Carlson, who was regularly drawing 3 million viewers a night, parted ways with Fox News. And then, just an hour later, Don Lemon tweeting he is out at CNN after 17 years with that network.
It also shows that the media is obsessed with itself. It's in a sort of narcissistic spiral, reporting on its own perspectives, its own heroes and its own villains. What is the mainstream media supposed to be for? Just for a moment, remind yourself that it's actually about giving you information about important stuff, like how the government are governing, about how corporations are behaving, the information that you need to live your life efficiently and effectively so you're informed politically. It doesn't do that. You know it doesn't do that. You know that the mainstream media is owned by certain corporate interests. You know that it gets all of its revenue from like the pharmaceutical industry. You know that they're tied up with the military industrial complex, and you know that they support the state with only partisan distinctions between this party or that party defining their output. They do not serve in your awakening. They do not serve your empowerment. Where Tucker Carlson goes next will inform us a great deal about our political landscape. If he joins an independent news organization, that's going to be fascinating. It will demonstrate where the power is moving, and it will show us why authoritarian, centralized systems of power are doubling down on trying to censor, control, surveil, prohibit, smear, destroy any alternative voices, because they recognize that now we can all communicate instantaneously and challenge any narratives that they put forward. That's why they've become ultra propagandist.
The audience tops 3 million on an average night. Viewers drawn to Carlson's far-right opinions on issues from January 6th to immigration.
Far right, da-da-da. So you can see the opponents of Fox News and the detractors of Tucker use this as an opportunity to talk about the Dominion voting machines, the payouts, and Tucker Carlson being far right. Even if you are a Democrat, even if you are a socialist, to describe Tucker Carlson as far right is the only thing that's extreme that's going on there.
Carlson leaves just days after Fox Corporation settled a defamation lawsuit with Dominion Voting System for $787.5 million.
Much of the reporting of Tucker Carlson's departure has centered on Fox News' recent out-of-court settlement to Dominion, which, of course, is meant to verify Biden's authenticity and legitimacy as a president, and democracy more broadly as successful and functioning. Even if it's legally proven that those Dominion voting machines are effective, democracy itself is obviously broken, and here's just one example of how. Looking at other out-of-court settlements, for example, the pharmaceutical industry regularly settles out of court for much larger sums, and the pharmaceutical industry is the biggest funder of the mainstream media through advertising and commercials. In 2009, the largest healthcare fraud settlement in history, pharmaceutical giant Pfizer paid $2.3 billion to resolve criminal and civil allegations that the company illegally promoted uses of 4 of its drugs. So if you were a really ethical organization, you wouldn't go to the mat, go to bat for the pharmaceutical industry while attacking Fox News. Oh, they've paid $787 million. It's the biggest fight in history. What about Pfizer's billions settled out of court? You were happy to promote their product. How often do you see on mainstream media, sponsored by Pfizer?
CNN Tonight. Brought to you by Pfizer.
They cannot badmouth Pfizer. So them claiming to be ethical organisations is ridiculous. It's a minor difference that they are fetishizing and valorising because they've got nothing real to offer you. They know they've got nothing real to offer you. In 2020, the pharmaceutical industry spent $4.5 billion on advertising on national TV in the United States. In 2020, TV ad spending of the pharma industry accounted for 75% of the total ad spend. Okay, so we know that CNN and MSNBC and Fox News are all in bed with the pharmaceutical industry. What's their relationship like with that other titan of US and globalist power, the military-industrial complex? Many of the retired military leaders employed by the networks as paid contributors have secondary affiliations that are rarely if ever mentioned, leaving viewers in the dark about whose interests they're promoting. That's why people like Tucker Carlson, because Tucker Carlson attacks the military-industrial complex. Tucker Carlson says, I was wrong to promote the Iraq war. I'm ashamed of it. He sounds like a normal guy. You might not agree with him. You might think he's racist. You might think he's the worst person in the world. Or you might love him. But what the mainstream media, what these authoritarian systems are not acknowledging is we are being stripped of humanity. We're being stripped of real discourse, real connection, real conversation. So people that seem real, they have an impact. And they're going to have an impact because they're operating in a landscape of total corruption where they're posing as pious. But on what basis? They take money from the military-industrial complex, they take money from the pharmaceutical industry, they steal your data, they lie to you, and they want you to treat them like they're kind of priests or preachers or people with some kind of moral rectitude. They have none. None of the leading networks, including CNN, Fox, and MSNBC, makes a regular practice of announcing its military analysts' financial ties to the Pentagon, connections that could colour their on-air comments. MSNBC is owned by Comcast, a subsidiary of General Electric, the 14th largest defense contractor in the US. One wonders if General Electric are out in Taiwan right now, agitating for new contracts when Taiwan and China situation gets a little bit more aggressive. So how can they report honestly and openly? They have deep relationships with corporate and state interests that prevent them from reporting to you openly and honestly. And now, data capture, a significant part of the mainstream media's economic model, is stealing your data, packaging it up, and selling it. So how can they ever report openly on privacy? News outlets entrusted with promoting transparency and privacy are also lobbying behind closed doors against proposals to regulate the mass collection of Americans' data. The Interactive Advertising Bureau, a trade group, reported it was lobbying against a push at the Federal Trade Commission to restrict the collection and sale of personal data for the purpose of delivering advertisements. The IAB represents both data brokers and online media outlets that depend on digital advertising, such as CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, and dozens of other media companies. So all of them operate within one cohesive unit, capturing your data and selling it to advertisers. It's necessary for them to do that. So they can never do a story, this just in, people are bundling up your data and selling it, even worse than pornography sites do. And it is me. Is it me? Or does the future feel more insecure and uncertain? Wars, pandemics, lies, trickery. My cats keep having kittens. The last one's personal. For those who are in the United States, there is a way to secure your hard-earned nest egg. American Hartford Gold make it easy to protect your savings and retirement accounts with physical gold and silver. With one phone call, they can have physical gold and silver delivered right to your door, or inside a qualifying retirement account like your IRA or 401k. American Hartford Gold is the highest rated firm in the US with an A+ rating from the BBB and thousands of satisfied clients. Right now, they will give you up to $5,000 of free silver on your first qualifying order. This offer is only for US customers. Call 866-505-8315. That's 866-505-8315, or simply text BRAND to 998899. Get up to $5,000 of silver and protect your future in this crazy, crazy world with some solid precious metals literally made in stars. The lobbying reveals a tension that is rarely a centre of the discourse around online privacy. Major media corporations increasingly rely on a vast ecosystem of privacy violations, even as the public relies on them to report on it. In 2020, a study found that news websites contained the most trackers globally, more than business, banking, entertainment, or adult websites. They're worse than porn. While users may turn to the news to learn of ways in which corporations compromise their privacy, it is news sites where we find the greatest risk risk to privacy, noted the report. That is a literal definition of irony. You might go to a mainstream media news website to learn about privacy. They'll steal your data and sell it while you're doing it. What the Tucker Carlson story points to more broadly is the decay of trust in the mainstream media. Tucker is a powerful voice because people trust him. You might not like him. You might like Don Lemon, who's also left. You might like Jon Stewart, who I think is amazing, who asks difficult questions of people in power. That isn't what I'm saying. You've got the right to like whoever you want to like. What we're discussing is the economic models and how these economic models have been impacted by the technological revolution and how it has impeded their ability to tell you the truth, and how it's now impossible for the mainstream media to do anything other than advocate for the state and work for corporate interests. Let's explain why using this fantastic article by Leighton Woodhouse. The era of mass media, during which just a dozen or so giant print and broadcast corporations enjoyed hegemonic control over the national public discourse, lasted about 80 years, beginning roughly a century ago when modern television was born. That era ended 2 decades ago when social media networks emerged. With the cheap, targeted advertising their technology enabled, the new tech platforms destroyed the business model of the mass media. Unable to compete for advertisers, the media mammoths of the 20th century floundered. The entire industry was thrown into a crisis, bleeding revenue and laying off staff. It's economics that's at the heart of this. That is why they are amplifying their message either on the left or the right, not because they care about the issues. Of course they don't care about the issues any more than Budweiser care about trans issues or blue-collar union issues. They care about selling their product, providing a platform for advertisers. They can't do that effectively anymore because a better model, i.e. this one, currently exists. At the same time, social media began sorting news consumers into hyper-polarized digital silos, shattering the broad political center that the traditional media catered to and relied upon to sell advertisements to a mass audience. The New York Times, CNN, and even Fox News saw their broad national readerships and viewerships contract into smaller and ever more partisan echo chambers, even as ordinary people began to forge horizontal connections with one another online, exchanging information laterally. We have networked communication now. You tell us stuff all the time that we report on. One example being when that Facebook whistleblower came out and we went, oh, that's good, she's standing up to Facebook. All of our comments under the video was like, hold on a minute, they're going to use this information to censor people's communication on Facebook, not to impose regulation on Facebook itself. You were right. We now know that. Our business model and our media model is better because we're listening to you all of the time. We know that our collective intelligence is vast and greater. We know that we're limited. We know that I have personal biases, personal experiences that mean I can't sometimes see the wood for the trees, but we remain engaged with you so that we can evolve a better, inclusive narrative that's beyond the political models that are dying, that this article describes as now irrelevant. We are using a model of the center versus the periphery, not the left versus the right. We're going to have to get over that because that's what they're using to keep us separated and divided because that's all they've got now. The public began generating their own autonomous narratives about world events, typically cobbled together eclectically from reports by various news outlets, but beholden to none of them in particular. That's literally what we do here. We look at mainstream media outlets, we find narratives that we believe are helpful to you, we use the information you give us, and we have a conversation about it. It's a better model. We're not beholden to advertisers in the same way. You know we have sponsorship, we require sponsorship. There are people here working. Who do you think's operating this camera? Who do you think's putting all this content together? But what we have is an authentic connection with you. We have the ability to apologize, to respond in real time. The power to shape the national narrative devolved downward, becoming increasingly fractured in the process. That's exactly what should happen. Power should be with you. We should be responding to you. You shouldn't have organizations telling you what to think, a government involved in your life intimately, corporations ignoring your requirements to amass huge profits. You have the power. That's how this should be developing. Martin Gurri, in his book, The Revolt of the Public, describes that now the possibility and necessity for more before democracy exists. We have to accept that people live in different communities with different values, ideals, and principles. And instead of continually turning against one another, we could devolve democracy. Okay, you want to run your community like this, do you? Oh, you're Muslim. Oh, you're trans. Oh, you're Christian. You're working class. You've got to be able to run your own communities. Instead of turning people against one another in continual fear, you have to allow them to democratically govern their own communities. Or, alternatively, what you could do is centralize authority, censor dissent, smear your opponents, and shut down all opposition. That's what they're trying to do. This anarchic new media ecosystem has defined the public discourse ever since. For both elected politicians and the administrative state, it has constituted a perennial crisis. Bureaucracies manage populations by striking bargains with leaders. You can't negotiate with a mob, much less 1,000 of them. From the perspective of the state, this new information landscape was essentially ungovernable. An entire regime of social control helmed by the most powerful politicians in the country in partnership with the titans of the media industry was felled. In the age of social media that the new platforms jump-started, the state's ability to control world events by playing reporters like pawns on a chessboard withered away as the influence of the media corporations they worked for dissipated. It's no longer to control information in the same way. That's why they are continually trying to introduce ideas that legitimize censorship and control. Oh, look at all this misinformation and disinformation. That's dangerous. What they recognize is that the state's power is diminishing, the traditional media's power is diminishing, the relationship they have with one another are becoming irrelevant. While this seems like a terrifying time, this is an amazing time. This is a time to take the power back. This is a time where you can demand control over your own life and your own community. You can simply say, we don't need you anymore. The political elite stumbled through this bedlam for 2 decades, but over that time, new gatekeepers emerged to replace those that had faded away with the decline of the mass media. The state created a new apparatus of control over the public discourse, one whose existence most Americans are still oblivious to. Though it has served the momentary partisan interests of both Republicans and Democrats at various times, to the political establishment at large, this flattened, fragmented digital media landscape has been a prolonged disaster. It thwarted the Obama administration's legislative ambitions by fueling the Tea Party. It gave rise to the ascendance of Donald Trump before defying the new president at every step through its constant agitation of a radicalized liberal resistance. During the pandemic, its rebellion against technocratic arrogance and authority drove vaccine hesitancy and opposition to lockdown measures and mask mandates. The pandemic was a unique time where we saw the assertion of authoritarianism by legitimizing its own measures through safety. At the beginning, I think most of us thought this is a unique situation. There is a need for state control and possibly an advantage to pharmaceutical innovation. As it evolved, different narratives began to emerge, and those narratives were controlled and shut down. We all experienced and saw that happen. Let me know in the chat and the comments what you learned during the pandemic period. All the while, it has hastened the shrinking of both major political parties and the growth of independent voters into a clear plurality, and probably any day now, an outright majority of the American electorate. What is emerging is the genuine possibility for a new political movement informed by independent media, enabling you to communicate what you want and how you want your individual, collective and community life to be run. An emergence of a new federalism and secession in America could be the result of this, maybe should be the result of this, because who wants to spend the rest of their life arguing about gun control, not gun control, abortion, not abortion, progressivism, traditionalism, when it is possibly true that there are different ways of doing it? Do you imagine that there might be tribes in Iceland that live differently from people in Senegal? Or why don't we put them in a room and make them kill each other until they agree whether it's better to eat fish or antelope? You know, this ridiculous way to live life. Let people be who they are. Here's a quote from a behemoth of the mainstream media, the New York Times, that indicates where we are in the media landscape right now. A majority of American voters across nearly all demographics and ideologies believe their system of government does not work, said the Times. We all think that now, whether you're on the right, the left, in the middle, a radical, an anarchist, a traditionalist, a progressivist, you recognize that government doesn't work anymore. They know that, and they know you know that. What they're trying to prevent is the natural evolution of those ideas. Hang on, we need different systems of government now, don't we? Why are we living with ideas that are hundreds of years old when we now have the technology to live more democratically? The only way to prevent the natural evolution of the way that power and community works is to bludgeon us with misinformation, to destroy and smear leaders in the space, and double down on authoritarianism, censorship, surveillance, control. In this instance, the media and the government have the same interest, the preservation of the old model, to prevent it dying. It's being continually defibrillated because actually it's dying. And you can see that very clearly in the figure of Joe Biden. An old octogenarian dying model is being trotted out for another 4 years when whoever we are, left or right, we know it's over. In the censorship industrial complex, the political establishment finally found a solution to the problem that plagued it for 20 years. Stripped of their erstwhile ability to control events by concentrating its massive influence on a handful of well-positioned producers, editors, reporters and media executives, the political elite found new gatekeepers to replace those it had lost. The executives who run the tech platforms can't control the content of the news, but they can restrict our ability to see it. And that's exactly what's happening now. Tucker was an anomaly, an outlier. Whether you think he's racist or you don't like him, or whether you love him and think he's the next Jesus, what you have to accept is he was out of step with the cadence of ordinary mainstream rhetoric. That's why I predict he'll find himself in an independent news space now, perhaps with more power than ever. Simply because our state systems, our systems of government, our systems of media, our systems of finance are dying because of our new technological and communication power. Thanks to the geniuses that came up with these amazing devices and tools, we now can communicate collectively, individually, democratically. There's no reason for the degree of centralized power that we've had for the last century when we have new models and new possibilities. We have to investigate them together. We have to demand them. It is our democratic right. We shouldn't be pinioned between two parties that ultimately work for the same elite financial and corporate organizations anymore. Demand democracy, demand freedom, demand independent media. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, have a look at either of these. Turn on the notification bell. We need you. We rely on you. We are in an open dialogue with you. More important than any of that, though, is that you please, if you can, stay free.